So I wanted you to take a look at these compounds. You have to be familiar with all of these compounds. They're going to be addressed when we talk about cycling of matter. For this test, if you see the word nitrogen gas, I'll put N2 next to it. Nitrate, I'll put NO3. But for the future, you're going to have to recognize. If you have a question that's essay, you can either reference carbon dioxide or the compound CO2, or for any of these. But in the future, you're going to have to be able to see these things and know what is being referenced after Unit 2 test. I meant Unit 3. So we're going to start with the water cycle, one you're most familiar with. It could also be known as the hydrologic cycle. Many parts of it you already know. There's going to be some you're not familiar with. So for starters, I want you to know that water travels through all layers of Earth. So when I reference biosphere, that's a term that you should already be familiar with. Biosphere is every living thing located on all layers of Earth, because water travels through the atmosphere, geosphere, and hydrosphere. And through people or living things. We're going to focus on the atmosphere layer, the first layer, which is the troposphere. And we're also going to focus on the crust of the geosphere. So we're never going to go below into the mantle or core, and we're never going to go past the troposphere when we're discussing the water cycle. So every cycle has to have a starting point. I'm going to start in the atmosphere. On your test, I may ask you to start at some other point in the cycle. Keep in mind, like what I said before, cycles are not necessarily a flow. Sometimes they intertwine and end and start at different locations, and I'm going to try to orient you on what that means. So if I'm going to say, how does water enter the atmosphere? It goes in through evaporation. Evaporation is basically when water converts from liquid to gas. Evaporation can also take place in the leaves of trees, and this is called transpiration. So if you look at this diagram, this body of water, so a lake, a puddle, any type of surface water will evaporate. But if water goes from this tree into the atmosphere, that's called transpiration, okay? Now, once we're in the atmosphere, condensation occurs. And basically, that's when water goes from the state that it was in the atmosphere, which is gas, and turns back into liquid. Once the water is liquid, immediately water will fall to the ground. So precipitation, you could put fall to the ground. And when water falls to the ground, it falls as either rain, hail, sleet, or snow. Now, when this water falls to the ground, which would be here, it could also, remember, fall back on a body of water, such as a lake or an ocean. Let's say it falls back on the lake or an ocean, it's going to go right back and evaporate and do this again. Okay, so there's where the new cycle hits. If the cycle is going to complete and it fell on land, we're going to go here. So now water that falls on land is going to infiltrate into the ground. So think of infiltrate into the ground or into soil. Once water hits the ground and goes through the soil, called infiltration, it's going to go deeper down, and deeper in soil you have rocks, and water will percolate through the rocks, basically through the cracks of the rocks or in between rocks. It'll seep through, and then it'll land in an aquifer, and that should be in your notes as well. Into aquifer. And when it's in the aquifer, which is a river, underground river, it's going to run off. And basically runoff means this. Here's water showing percolation, and then water flows underground because it's an underground river, and then it flows into this body of water, which is usually a large body of water like a lake or an ocean. So aquifers connect or find large bodies of water. Now, if you look at this diagram, there's transpiration happening, evaporation from the body of water. When water comes down as precipitation, it can flow on the top of the ground into a large body of water, and that's called surface runoff. How does this happen? Water levels where there's a lot of greenery, this can happen. Where there's layering or higher elevations, surface runoff is strong. And this is important because surface runoff is the ideal situation for water to cycle.